Hi everyone, in this video we're going to be talking about dictionaries. Before I get started on this video, I want to explain that I sound a little nasally. I'm dealing with a cold or allergies or something. And you may also hear a lawnmower in the background because my son is out mowing the lawn. But I wanted to introduce you to a new data type today. Now, when I say the word dictionary, you're going to think of a physical book that has words and their definitions in it, right? Well, you'd be correct, but it's also the word that we use for a certain data type in Python as well. So let's revisit something you already kind of know. Okay, so I can have a list. Oops. Okay, so there's a list of students, let's say, and I can loop through a list of students. And I can also print or access a student by their index number in the list. Okay, so this for loop is going to print out Mary, Bob, Carl, and this print statement is going to print out just Bob because he is at position index 1 in our list because lists start at position 0. Now, let's say I had a list of test scores. Okay, and my intent was the 78 was Mary's score, the 90 was Bob's score, and the 88 was Carl's score. If I wanted to say, if I wanted to ask the user, say, whose score do you want to see? Let's say the user entered the word Mary. Okay, I want to see Mary's score. There is no straightforward way to say, oh, Mary, she's 78. We can see it as the programmer because we know that they're at the same position. But programmatically, your program would have to first say, what is the position? I'll just call it I for index. And I'd have to say students.index S, right? Because that's going to be the user's input. So I'd first have to find out what position Mary is in students, and then I would have to print out S, and then test score is, and then I would have to find this index in the scores list. Okay, so let's run this. Okay, whose score do you want to see? Let's say I'll see Carl's. And you can see that it works, but I had to go through this extra step to first get the index of the user input and then pass that into the scores as an index to find the associated test score. Well, wouldn't it be nice if I had a way to just map Mary to 78, Bob to 90, and Carl to 88 in one data type? Well, guess what? I can do that. Okay, so let me get rid of all this mess here. Actually, I'll leave the whose score do you want to see stuff. And I'll get rid of this. And now it's time to show you a new data type. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change, I'll leave those there for a minute. I'll just make a new variable and I'll call it test scores. Now this is going to be a sequence of items just like students and just like scores, except I'm going to I'm going to combine Mary and 78, I'm going to combine Bob and 90 and Carl and 88. So I start off with empty punctuation here. Okay, so dictionaries, rule 1 is that they are framed with curly braces. Okay, now inside the curly braces, I'm going to have the sequence of items separated by commas. Okay, so that's going to be Mary and 78, comma, Bob and 90, comma, and then Carl and 88. So my elements in the dictionary are going to be separated with commas just like lists are. Now, for the name value pair, where I'm marrying Mary and 78. I'm going to separate them with a colon. So I'm going to have Mary, colon, 78. Bob, colon, 90. And then Carl, colon, 88. Okay, so now I'm going to get Mary, Bob, or Carl's test scores from this data type, this dictionary, instead of having to worry about two lists. So how do I do that? I ask the user for whose score they want to see, and once I have that in variable s, I'm simply going to take the dictionary name and pass in that string. So if I run it, whose score do I want to see? Let's say Bob, he got a 90. I run it again. Whose score do I want to see? I want to see Mary, 78. All right, so that is the equivalent of saying Mary inside of the brackets after test score. So Mary becomes, that string, Mary becomes my index. Just like I had to use 0, 1, or 2 when it was a regular kind of list, I now actually can pass in a key value, an index that carries a little bit more meaning and significance as it relates to my data. So these are very convenient. So I can also create dictionary entries on the fly. Let's say, so if I was starting, let's say, team, okay. So if I have a team, and let's say I have an empty team, and if I wanted to add a member to my team, I would say team.append Mary, okay, and then if I were to print my team at that point, let me skip that section there. So my team so far is Mary, and then if I wanted to add more members, I would do it like this. Let me print it again. Okay, and so you can see growing my team when my team is a list value or list data type means that I have to use the .append method. Well, what if I have another student in my class and I want to add that student and his or her score to my test scores? Can I do that? Is it a method like append? How do I do it? Well, it's actually even simpler when you want to add a test score. Let me get rid of this. I'm going to say s equals input. Whose score would you like to add? And then let's do a v for value. And then I'll intify this, right? Input. What score did they earn? Okay, so I'm asking the user for two values. So I called this S for student and V for value. Okay, how do I add something to test scores? Well, it's super simple. Test scores, bracket. I put the user entered name as the index. Then we have an assignment, and then I put the V on the right side of the assignment. Okay, so now if I were to print test scores at this point, what do I have? Okay, so we run it. Whose score would you like to add? Let's say Jackie. She earned a 98, let's say. Give myself a good score. And now you can see Jackie has been added to my original dictionary. And you can keep doing this, and you can keep adding name-value pairs, but you want to be careful that you don't add a left side, in other words, a student name that's already there, because the left side works more properly if it's unique. So let me show you what I mean. So let me add Jackie, and let's say she got a 100 to the beginning of my test scores. Now I run it, and I'm adding Jackie, and she got a 98. So you can see that the Jackie value was replaced. So the first thing that this assignment statement is going to do is say, if the value is already there, it's just going to replace it. So if the index is there and there was a Jackie index there, it's going to get replaced. So what if I had two Jackies? Oops. And the other Jackie got a 70. Okay, what's going to happen if I look at Jackie's score here? Okay, so I run this. Okay, let's add somebody different this time. I'll say Alex got a 79. Okay, so Alex got added to 79. I have two Jackies, but I don't have the original Jackie who got a 100. Do you see what it did? So you run into a lot of weird anomalies when you have multiple values on the left side that are the same. So in the case of my program here, this Jackie 70 overwrote the value at the beginning. So rule of thumb is don't do that. Try to keep the left side of your name value pairs unique. All right, so next up, what else can I do? What else can I do with test scores? Now you can see that test scores, I can pass in new values this way, right? I can either have a variable there or, whatever. Let me actually get rid of this. Okay, you saw what printing out the test scores looks like. Has the same syntax as the way we built it. Can I loop through test scores? We know how to loop through a list. If I wanted to loop through students, the code I just erased earlier said for student in students, right? Actually, did it? I don't know what I erased, but for student in students is how we would get through a list. And that would print out Mary, Bob, Carl. Okay. So can we do the same thing by looping through test scores? So let me change this to test score, and I'll change this to test scores with an S, and then print the test score. Does it work? Not really, or not like we'd expect, right? In the dictionary, everything that's separated by commas is actually a name value pair, so why did we only get the left side here? Well, that is because we only provided one variable, and this is actually returning 2. So what if we did comma, let's say, how about student, comma, score? Can we do that? So I'll say student, comma, score. So we can't do that because it's not in a format where we're getting pairs actually returned. If we want both sides of the name value pair returned, we actually have to use a dictionary method, and that method is called items. Now, what does items return? Let's go up to the line above for a second. I'll comment this out and print out test scores.items. Okay, if I run that, test scores.items returns a kind of weird looking object called dict items. It's still a sequence, but it's a sequence of tuples. Okay, a tuple looks like a list. In other words, Jackie, comma 100, that's kind of like a list, but it's surrounded with parentheses instead of square brackets. And the parentheses mean that Python considers that a tuple, and the characteristics of a tuple are very much like a list, except that the order matters. Okay, so Bob being in position 1 has some significance, and 90 being in the second position has some significance. So the order matters, and I can't change it. I can't change Bob so that his name is Robert. It's known as immutable. So tuples, you can't change the order, and you can't change the elements in the tuple. Okay, so I'm getting a list of tuples back. And it makes sense that the order matters because the string name values are actually the index to the right side values. So you have to have them in order. If I switched Bob and 90, it would make the data unusable. All right, so that's testscores.items. Now if I want to use testscores.items, it is a sequence, so I should be able to for loop it. And since it returns 2 values, okay, so if I took this score off of here for a second, if I loop through it like that, I'm going to get each row as a tuple. But look what I can do. I can add 2 values as my for iteration because I'm getting groups of 2 values now for real. And if I run it, you can now see I can work with student separately from score. So I could put something like received A, and then my output can look a little nicer. Okay, what else can I cursor through in test score? Well, there's other methods. So if I block this off for a second, undo this print, I also have a method called keys. Now what do you think the keys is going to give me? Okay, it's going to give me a sequence of just the left side values. Those are the quote index or indices for these data elements. Okay, I can also get the right side values by putting the word values here as my method, and that will return to me just the test scores. So what can I do with that? Well, let's see. What if I wanted, first of all, I could loop through them, right? So I could say for score in test scores dot values, and then print scores because it's a sequence, or score with one with no s. Okay, so I can loop through them. But even though it looks funny, when we print it out, like what test scores dot values actually is, it's still a sequence of numbers. So can I do some of the list functions, such as let's say sum, to like against this dict values list of numbers? So let's do test scores dot values and see if it works. And sure enough, I get 445. So I could use that to maybe find the average, right? So can I do len of test scores dot values? And let me do pren there. Yep, and it looks like my average score was an 89. So that is a quick overview of keys, values, items, and how in general to index or work with the name value pair inside of dictionaries.